Well,
The bombing at Centennial Olympic Park this morning was an evil act of terror.
What's up, Damn Nation? Steven the Damn Guide here. So as you can tell, we are in actually a different spot than usual. We're not in a big haunted location, but today we're going to be doing something special. Consider this story time with the Damn Guide, because we are going to be learning about the Centennial bomber that bombed the 1996 Olympics, Centennial Park. We're going to follow his story and his bombings, as well as the story of Richard Jewell, the man who was blamed by the FBI and the media when he did nothing wrong. So you guys just hang in there and let's go over the story. Our story begins on July 27, 1996, at the Centennial Olympic Park in Atlanta, Georgia. Thousands of people gathered together to witness a concert by Jack Mack and the Heart Attack. What they didn't know is that someone else had something very terrible planned, because in this crowd of thousands underneath a bench sat an Alice pack, a type of military backpack that was filled with 3 pipe bombs that were all wrapped in 3-inch nails. It was set up with a directional plate, this type of metal plate that would have sent most of the blast towards the crowd and would have killed many people if it wasn't for the quick actions of a security guard there by the name of Richard Jewell. Richard Jewell noticed the backpack and could tell that it was suspicious in where it was and by the fact that it had been left there for the past 30 minutes. So he actually informed the Georgia Bureau of Investigation officers that were there. They actually brought the ATF to the site. Everyone always took Richard Jewell as a joke, but they didn't today, when the ATF found in that bag the explosive device. 2 to 3 minutes after they realized what it was and began the evacuation, it detonated.
And nobody's bothering you, right?
well,
There were 2 deaths and over 100 injured. Now that count sounds really high, but it is estimated that if Richard Jewell hadn't noticed the bag and it had gone off and detonated before the area was evacuated, upwards of 400 people could have been killed. But thanks to his quick action, only 1 person was killed by the explosion itself, and 1 person sadly died from a heart attack while running away from the blast. In the aftermath of the blast, investigators rolled in from the FBI, the ATF, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and the Georgia State Patrol. They performed a very thorough investigation and cleared through the entire area looking for anything that could be a sign or a hint. They searched thoroughly to find out who did it, how they did it, and how to prevent it from happening again. In their thorough search, they actually found that the explosive device itself had a sort of directional charge. It was meant to explode directly towards the crowd, and even had this steel plate behind it to direct most of the blast forward to the crowd. But somehow through the night it had gotten shifted, so it wasn't, right where it needed to be. Plus, it kind of helped that Richard Jewell came in and evacuated the whole area. Richard Jewell was presented as a hero. He was given an interview on CNN. They considered him, just a good old boy who did what anyone else would have done in the situation, who was smart, who noticed what he noticed, and he was able to stop such a terrible bombing from happening. This story continued for 4 days. On the 4th day, an article was released by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who said that Richard Jewell was now the prime suspect in the bombing. Information that was leaked to them by the FBI themselves, because they were trying so hard to find somebody to blame so that the public could feel safe and the Olympic Games could continue. So they went for the low-hanging fruit. This young security guard who always wanted to be a police officer, but never, had the cut, never made it. They said that he matched the role of a lone wolf bomber, or more specifically, that of a false hero bomber, meaning that he set the bomb himself just so that he could find it and be heralded on as a hero. The investigation begun shortly after. The FBI came in and did a complete look-through of his entire history, talking to anyone that Richard Jewell ever knew. They even found this photo, which I'm going to post right here, and used this as evidence to kind of prove that he was such a lone wolf killer, even though it was just a single photograph of him dressed in camo with a military backpack on, holding an AR-15. The press took this photo and ran with it, giving him the nickname the Unibubba because of the fact that everyone just called him a Bubba. The investigation took a very abnormal turn. Right when the FBI was going in to search through his home to look for any evidence, somehow the media caught wind of this, so it was highly publicized. They literally had the media showing cameras right at his front door of his mother's apartment, while the FBI was going through taking a whole lot of stuff as evidence. They took all of his mother's Tupperware, 22 of her Disney VCR tapes, none of which they ever returned, her crock pot, as well as a whole lot of other photos and other stuff throughout the house. Now here is the part where we know that it was just completely wrong. So Richard Jewell had a gag item inside of his home. It was, I'm sure some of you guys have seen them before, it was a inert grenade on a platform that had a pin that had a number on it, and it said complaints department, take a number. It was a gag item. Well, the FBI found this gag item, and they actually went to the press and said that they found an inert explosive device inside of the home, not even mentioning that it was actually a gag item. So then and there, the press vilified him and made him guilty without even seeing a single day in front of a judge. Richard Jewell was never arrested, and even though he was under constant surveillance by the FBI, the media, they were constantly sieging the outside of his house to the point that he was barely even able to travel, which he was terrified to go anywhere outside of the house because he was liable to get attacked since everyone blamed him for the bombing. This investigation continued for 4 months until the FBI finally came out and admitted that he was no longer one of their suspects. But this left the story with a very deep hole. Who did it? With Richard Jewell now cleared of his crimes, he began a very thorough lawsuit of all of the different news outlets that blamed him for such a heinous crime. Media outlets like NBC News, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, anyone who, said bad things about him and tried to blame him for the bombing, they sued. That went on for 15 years until 2012, when many of the companies settled for the lawsuit, giving him a substantial amount of money. The sad part is he never got to live to see the day when the lawsuit was finished, because Richard Jewell passed away in 2007 from complications from diabetes. Now with their lead suspect gone, the FBI didn't have any idea who was behind the bombings until 1997, when bombings happened at a lesbian nightclub and an abortion clinic.
Oh my God!
What the hell was that?
They were able to actually trace those bombings to the bombing at Centennial Park, judged by the type of dynamite that was used, the type of piping, even the steel directional plate that aided in the attack. So the issue is that these bombs were not targeting neither the nightclub, nor was the bomb targeting the abortion clinic. There was a second charge set up to go off about 35 minutes later, give or take, from the original bomb. And it was set up with directional plates so that it would spray out in a certain area. The bomber set it up to specifically attack first responders. 35 minutes after they showed up, which is about the average response time for mass police outage to something like that in the town of Atlanta. The police were no closer to finding the suspect. That was until January 29th, 1998, when the bomber made his fourth and last bombing. He attacked an abortion clinic in Birmingham, Alabama with a bomb, though this time he actually changed the design of his bomb. Instead of using a timer, he used a remote switch so that he himself could watch the detonation and see the face of the person that he was blowing up. This one resulted in 1 death and 1 injury. The death was Robert Sanderson, an off-duty police officer with Birmingham Police, and the one that was injured is nurse Emily Lyons, who had to go through 20 surgeries and was nearly blind and deaf for the rest of her life and still has to remain in a wheelchair due to this blast. But he slipped up on this incident. 2 eyewitnesses watched him fleeing the scene and were able to track down his car, follow him to his car. They saw the type of car and the tag, and police were able to look him up. Finally, we knew our bomber, and his name was Eric Rudolph. With their suspect finally in their sight, the FBI set their sights on the town of Murphy, North Carolina. Murphy, North Carolina sits right on the edge of the Nantahala Wilderness, 4,000 acres of mountains, woodlands, with very little to no roads in there. And it is home of the North Carolina Regulators, a militia that has its ties back to before the American Revolution. They literally fought against the British to keep them out of their area, and then fought against George Washington once he sided with the Federalists. So it was an understatement that when the FBI rolled in, people in the town were not happy. The FBI went through extreme lengths to try and find Eric Rudolph, who had escaped their attempt to capture him and escaped into the Nantahala Wilderness. So they set up blockades, sent undercover agents in the form of hikers throughout the entire Nantahala Wilderness, and sent patrols in, even setting up trail cameras to try and capture him and figure out where he was. It was a very, very long, drawn-out process that the locals did not very much so enjoy, to the point that tensions built up so much that the North Carolina Regulators came together and began pushing back against the FBI and what they were doing there. It was then that Eric Rudolph finally sent out notes to separate sections of the press, calling himself a member of the extremist group, the Army of God. Now, before this point, the Army of God was barely ever talked about, but he brought it to the forefront. He did not at first claim the bombing at the Olympics, but he did claim the 2 abortion clinic bombings and the bombing at the lesbian nightclub. This brought on a whole lot of support from the locals, which are predominantly Christians with extreme faiths. So to them, they saw him as a hero and even created this song here, Run Rudolph, Run. It's a pretty catchy tune, and I'll play just a little bit of a clip of it right here.
Now you gotta run, Rudolph, run. Oh, the FBI's gonna shoot you with their guns. A modern day Billy the Kid, so you better do just like you did. Run, Rudolph, run.
As you can tell from this song, the public had a very, very positive and strong feeling for him. It is suspected that he actually had many people from the public helping him survive, bringing him supplies, everything that he'd need. Now, for most, it would be very difficult for someone to survive in this rugged wilderness, but not for Eric Rudolph. Eric Rudolph actually spent some time in the United States Armed Forces, where he specialized in tracking, evasion, and, you guessed it, explosive manufacturing. So he was very well versed in how to survive and was able to more or less thrive here in the wilderness of the Nantahala. Along with this fact, and the fact that he actually was raised in the town of Nantahala for a good chunk of his childhood life, he was basically bred to survive in this wilderness. He had lived there for about 5 years prior, stocking up supplies, setting up hideouts in the woods where he stored food in these giant 55-gallon metal jugs. He was planned for this and was ready when the FBI came knocking. And due to his connections from his childhood, especially with this man named Thomas Wayne Branham, who had connections with the North Carolina regulators, he was able to kind of get in, and people respected him off of the fact that they knew who he knew. So due to the fact that he knew this member of the North Carolina regulators, he was kind of more trusted by the group and was even allowed, to get closer in. However, they quickly lost any support for him once they found out that he was also responsible for the bombings at the Centennial Park in Atlanta. And so began the long hunt that cost millions of dollars of taxpayer currency and took 5 whole years to lead up to his capture. 5 years he was on his own in the Nantahala wilderness. When he was finally captured, he was actually outside of a food store in the dumpster, digging through the trash trying to find food. That was when he was found by a rookie cop in the area named Jeffrey Scott Postel on May 31st, 2003. After 5 years, they finally caught him. He was brought in, and at first they didn't even know who he was. He claimed to be a hobo that didn't have any ID and didn't know his social security number. That was until one of the guys at the office looked at him and said, "He looks a whole lot like Eric Rudolph. Brown hair, check. Blue eyes, check. Earlobes that were connected, check." As they looked closer at him, they realized that this rookie cop had done it. He had captured a man that has been so long, 5 years, on the FBI's top 10 most wanted, and had a bounty of $1 million. He did it. And finally, 7 years after the original bombing, they had justice. But even arrested, Eric Rudolph had more plans than they expected. Once they took him into custody, they realized that he had looked clean shaven, hair dyed, new sneakers, and a new camouflage jacket. Someone had been taking care of him. They brought him to Birmingham, Alabama, where he was tried for his crimes, but he always seemed to be one step ahead of the investigators. This time, his one step ahead came in the form of 250 pounds of dynamite, which he had stashed at different spots throughout the Nantahala wilderness. One of those locations was near a Boy Scout camp, and due to the fact that the dynamite had been sitting there for 5 years, it had grown more and more unstable. He always had a plan, and this time he was able to use his knowledge of the location of all of this dynamite that could cause such a huge explosion and loss of life. He was able to give up that information in return for a plea deal so that he would not be brought before the electric chair or lethal injection. On April 8, 2005, he went onto national television and gave his plea of guilty. Though he was specific about the plea. He said that his plea was not him admitting that he was guilty, but instead it was depriving the government's goal of taking his life. I'll show you a clip from his confession here, with him confessing in both Alabama and Georgia to all 4 bombings. He was sentenced to 4 life sentences, narrowly escaping the death penalty due to his plea. Once he confessed to all the bombings and was sentenced to 4 life sentences, he was sent to 80X Florence Supermax Prison in Florence, Colorado, where he will serve out his 4 life sentences. He is accompanied in this prison by another pretty famous bomber, the Unabomber. Their cells are down the hallway from one another. And once he realized that he was in the same cell as the Unabomber and heard about the Unabomber's manifesto, he too wrote a manifesto to try and reach out for fans. The Unabomber has never read his manifesto. This brings an end to the story of Eric Rudolph, the bomber who terrorized the 1996 Olympics, blew up 2 abortion clinics and a lesbian club, and put fear in the heart of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And this is also the end of the story of Richard Jewell, who was given the blame for something that he did not commit, and through his own hard work finally cleared his name. From your friend, the Damn Guide, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a happy morning, afternoon, evening, or night. Thank you, and good night.
He wouldn't harm a fly, but the Lord knows Eric Rudolph didn't want that man to die. But he could not just sit back knowing all the things they'd done. So he stopped that baby killing factory. He made a homemade bomb. Now you gotta run, Rudolph, run, Rudolph, run, or the FBI's gonna shoot you with their guns. So you better do just like you did. Run, Rudolph, run, Rudolph, run. North Carolina's a great state, mountains filled with poison ivy and rattlesnakes, and the FBI's not happy with it all. And when that bloodhounds tree a coon while they're howling at the moon, you better run, Rudolph, run, Rudolph, run. You better run, Rudolph, run, Rudolph, run, or the FBI's gonna shoot you with their gun. A modern day Billy the Kid, so you better do just like you did. Run, Rudolph, run, Rudolph, run. In a cave out in the woods. Those rattlesnakes taste mighty fine with a little drink of blackberry wine, but right now his mama's cooking sure would be good. But you gotta run, Rudolph, run, Rudolph, run, or the FBI's gonna shoot you with their guns. A modern day Billy the Kid, so you better do just like he did. Run, Rudolph, run, Rudolph, run. And Lord, it's getting awful scary when they're bringing in the military to hunt one man. You better run, Rudolph.